Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. President, it is truly an honor to work with the senator from Georgia as the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee. I can tell you that on behalf of the 72,000 veterans from South Dakota, it is work that needs to be done, and we appreciate your service and the ranking member's service in making this a bipartisan effort. Unfortunately, many of our nation's heroes aren't receiving the quality of health care that they've been promised due to decades of mismanagement and ongoing problems with the VA. And it's not acceptable, as the chairman has pointed out. In fact, of all the calls that we receive in my state asking for help with federal agencies, over half of all of those calls are coming from veterans seeking help with VA issues. These veterans in South Dakota and across the entire country continue to experience problems with health care delivery at the VA, including backlogs, long wait times, and frequent billing errors. As we seek to address these issues within the entire VA system, accountability is as important as it has ever been. The Veterans First Act takes meaningful steps to hold the VA accountable and in turn improve care for our veterans, which is the most important priority of all. This legislation, the Veterans First Act, puts the needs of our veterans first by addressing the lack of accountability at the VA. Unfortunately, the administration last week announced that it would not defend a provision of the Veterans Choice Act, which was passed with strong majorities in both chambers of Congress in 2014 and was signed by the president. In response, the VA announced last week it would no longer use its expedited removal authority to hold VA senior executives accountable, given this Justice Department decision. Regardless of the legal arguments surrounding this issue, the fact is that as a result of the VA's decision, we are now back to a pre-Phoenix scandal accountability at the VA. We owe it to our veterans to make certain they receive the best care possible and not have the agency responsible for that care refuse to remove non-performing or even criminally acting officials from important positions, as Congress granted the VA the right to do in the Veterans Choice Act 2 years ago. This is also important given that until recently, the VA didn't have a permitted Inspector General, or IG, in the last 2 years. Inspectors General are impartial and independent units within most federal agencies whose duty is to provide this accountability and oversight to combat waste, fraud, and abuse within the government. During that same time frame, the VA has been plagued with some of the worst scandals and mismanagement in the agency's history, and our veterans have paid the price. Some have even died. While I'm glad that the Inspector General Missel is now in office and can begin to address some of the VA's fraud and waste allegations, it is still too little, too late. That is why the bipartisan Veterans First Act is so important. Our bill will take strong, definitive, immediate steps to hold VA employees accountable for their actions. Let me give you some examples of what this bill includes. It will shorten the grievance process, making it easier to dismiss VA officials that breach the trust of the veterans that they are supposed to serve. It will remove the Merit Systems Protection Board from the appeal process for senior executives. And it expedites, when necessary, the removal of any employees at the VA, executives and rank-and-file employees alike. You don't have to take my word for it. You don't have to take the word of any senator in this body's word for it. You can simply listen to the words of Secretary McDonald himself. And on Monday, he stated, and this is a quote from Secretary McDonald of the VA, "The answer to the whole thing, in my opinion, is the Veterans First Act. The provisions that Senator Isaacson and Senator Blumenthal have put in the Veterans First Act, we all support. VA supports them. The Republican Party in the Senate supports them. The Democratic Party in the Senate supports them. We really think that this is the ultimate answer. I'm hoping the Veterans First Act will get passed soon." End of quote. Mr. President, this bill also includes a number of provisions that I have offered to improve accountability and care at the VA, such as the Veterans Choice Equal Cost for Care Act, which amends the Choice Act by eliminating the secondary payer clause to make certain veterans, it makes certain that veterans do not pay more for private care under the Choice Act than they would have if they were seen at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs facility. The key to that is right now we've got veterans going in, getting care at a private facility, assuming that the VA is going to pick up the cost for them, and then they find out that under the current plan where the VA is a secondary payer only, that they've got to pick up their own deductibles, of which they are not being reimbursed for, because the VA is secondary, not primary. That's wrong. That was not the intent of the Choice Act in the first place. The Veterans First Act takes care of that issue and will take care of a huge amount of the challenges that we have right now with the Choice Act. Also, the Veterans Health Administration Spending and Transparency Oversight Act. This legislation requires the Veterans Health Administration, or VHA, to produce an annual report to Congress detailing the cost of the health care that it provides to our veterans. Having accurate cost accounting by the VHA will help Congress identify legislation options aimed at better health care for our nation's veterans. I'm proud to be an original sponsor of the Veterans First Act, and I thank the members of the Veterans Affairs Committee, especially Chairman Isaacson and Ranking Member Blumenthal, and all of the other members here today for working together to produce meaningful, bipartisan reforms at the VA. Our nation's veterans who are now and have selflessly defended and protected our freedoms deserve that same commitment from the country they so proudly fought and defended. And with that, Mr. President, I would like to yield back to the chairman.